Now this car, the Insignia, well, there's not a lot wrong with this vehicle, to be quite honest. It's a pretty tidy package. You know, the dashboard looks alright to me, maybe a little bit cheesy in some places, but it's not as bad as a Ford. Everything's laid out nicely and stylish. The dials, well, they're a little bit blocked by the top of the steering wheel. The wing mirrors are a bit of a funny shape. They could do with some more glass so you can see what's going on around you. The rear vision is a bit of an issue with this car because there's not really much of a rear window. In fact, it's shaped a little bit like Ayers Rock. You don't really see a lot going on in there. The steering on the vehicle is very responsive. You know, the car does what you want it to do, but it has a terrible wobble to it. A simple test like this, 50 miles an hour, and the car is snaking on its own shock absorbers. Now, if a vehicle does this, imagine how it's going to react if you've got to do an emergency swerve. It's going to be counter-affecting everything you're doing. It's going to be bouncing and jolting all over the place, and it's going to make the vehicle extremely difficult to control. You know, that is not a situation you're going to want to get in. Now, another similar scenario could be like you get a high-speed puncture. You want to know you're going to be able to keep the car going in control. With a car that shakes like this when you rattle the steering wheel, it's quite frightening. So I personally would not fancy going down the motorway at 70 miles an hour in this vehicle, because I don't think for a moment I'm going to be able to control this vehicle at speed if I suddenly have to swerve. Now, this is the 6-speed manual. The engine is ticking over nicely. The gearbox is lovely, I have to say. It really is a nice shift. There's nothing aggressive about it at all. It's not like stirring rocks in a bucket. It's beautiful. The transition is fantastic. Brakes, a little bit grabby, not quite as nice to apply as you would get in a more top range vehicle, but if you put your forward foot to the floor, the car will shift. It's certainly enough to get you down a motorway and past some lorries. All in all, this isn't a bad vehicle, but where it does excel in certain ways, it doesn't go into the stellar regions of brilliance because it's limited by the Vauxhall's determination in their products. They won't go past a certain level. Now, everything's fine in here. The interior's fine, nice looking car, drives beautifully, but then they go and put some shitty shocks on, you know. Then they go and have bouncy shock absorbers and suspension, which makes the car a liability. You know, if they put a firmer suspension on this car, they would have a brilliant product. You know, for the sake of losing a little bit of comfort on the ride, you'd have a vehicle which is a lot more stable. But not everybody's going to be powering down the motorway at 70 miles an hour. You know, you might be nipping around a town doing the shopping or something. This is a very comfortable car. You know, there's not a lot of things wrong with this car, but don't expect too much with Vauxhall. There will be some bits, maybe some that I have brought up, maybe some that I haven't, that won't be quite good enough. But this car is pretty damn good. You know, it's got more good than bad. But if you're going to test drive one of these, give it a little wobble when you go down at 50-60 miles an hour, maybe even less, and just try and imagine yourself, whether you know, try and think to yourself, could I control this car if I suddenly had to shift that way or shift that way at speed? Would the car counter-affect my intentions and send me off into a snaky spiral down the road? Maybe I'm being a bit paranoid, I don't know. You take it for a test drive and decide, because that's the only thing I can find wrong with this car.